Venom: The Last Dance is a mess, even for the series of movies it's a part of. The opening scene already feels like we're rushing into the exposition for Noel so that we understand him as quickly as possible. Noel essentially states his name, what his goal is, and his backstory, and he's saying it to the xenophages that have already been in the know of his plans for years anyway. Then Noel explicitly states that the xenophages will be rewarded with their lives.
I will reward you with your lives.
So the guy who needs the xenophages to retrieve the codex that would free him from his prison apparently has the leverage over their lives. The same guy who failed to defeat his own symbiote children that can be shredded immediately by xenophages. But looking past the bizarre exposition dump, everything they establish about Noel and his backstory messes with the continuity of the first two movies and makes this whole plot really confusing.
My symbiote children betrayed me and imprisoned me here.
How could they possibly have done this if Noel had access to an army of xenophages? They're essentially speedsters that can travel around the world in an instant and can literally shred through these symbiotes with ease. Even one of them can't be fought by Venom. So how are we expected to believe that an army of symbiotes would have overpowered an army of xenophages? This is not even mentioning how powerful Noel should be, considering he created these symbiotes. And he literally has portal technology to bail him out if he truly needed it. And if Noel wanted to take over planets as he stated to do at the beginning, then why would he even bother sending symbiotes like Riot over to Earth so that he can send a rocket out in space to bring the rest of the symbiotes?
We need Carlton Drake's rocket. He will follow wherever I lead. He will come back here with millions more of my kind.
And you were gonna come back here with an invasion force and you were gonna go feed on a whole planet?
Yes!
Riot has the same goals as Noel. He planned to bring millions of his kind from his home planet in order to invade Earth. So why did this movie seem to forget this and frame Noel's backstory as if all the symbiotes turned on him and wanted to imprison him? Even if the rocket was needed to take them to Earth, what's stopping Noel from using his hive mind knowledge from Riot to travel over to Earth in the first movie, which we see him do at the start of this movie? He should have already been on Earth by the time Venom 1 even started.
80 billion light years of hive knowledge across universes.
This is multiversal knowledge here, amongst a symbiote hive mind, and yet this can't be shared between Riot and Noel?
At last a codex is being created. It will unlock this prison. Search the corners of the universe until you find this key.
Why would Noel need to search the corners of this universe to find this key if he already had knowledge as to where the rogue symbiotes have gone thanks to Riot? Noel straight up forgot the planet that Riot had arrived at. I'll be calling back to this backstory as we go along and learn new information, but for now I'm gonna table this and move on to the other problems. I don't understand the point of reshooting this entire post-credit scene from No Way Home. We already have the footage in No Way Home. We could even have the last parts of it recited while the Marvel intro is being displayed on screen. I thought how No Way Home did it was fairly efficient in terms of pacing, while also not needlessly using time and resources to reshoot the end of Far From Home, and for some reason, they cut out the mention of Spider-Man at the end of the exchange. And for some reason, the portal effect looks like one of those portals Noel used, instead of the effect we see in No Way Home when the other characters are sent back to their universes. It's such a weird way to bridge the gap because it feels disconnected from what we saw in No Way Home. It's not even consistent with what we've seen with Let There Be Carnage.
We're home! I'm so done with the multiverse shit!
How do you know that? Venom has no context to the events of No Way Home. He doesn't know that Doctor Strange was sending them home, so from his perspective, he could have universe hopped once again, but didn't confirm it was his home universe before concluding that. It's so abrupt and feels like pacing whiplash at the same time. We eventually get introduced to the scientists and the military general who are keeping the symbiotes in their secret lab, and Mulligan gets questioned regarding the symbiotes.
Why are they here?
What do they want?
Safe haven. We were running. His creatures search the universe for us. He will kill us all. There will be nothing left.
This just adds on to the blatant continuity problems this has with the other movies. These symbiotes were trying to take over the world in the first Venom movie. Riot was leading them to do this. They weren't trying to run from Noel and their home planet. They were trying to bring millions of symbiotes from their home planet to this world. How is Eddie holding on to this plane? The first Venom movie showed that Venom is sensitive to plane noises. He can't remain in Venom form when he hears a plane fly over him, yet he can somehow stick to the side of the plane. He for some reason thought this was a smart idea instead of hijacking a vehicle to drive across the country or venomizing an animal capable of such fast travel. And afterwards, we get a pretty significant character assassination for the self-proclaimed lethal protector.
but I've got to disappear.
What now?
We're in deep shit.
The xenophage straight up dies after the engine gets blown up, and instead of staying with these people to prevent the plane crash from killing them, Venom decides that he no longer cares about protecting the innocent and decides to leave from the plane. Venom is not a supervillain. He's an anti-hero with redeeming qualities.
You will only ever be allowed to touch, harm, eat very, very bad people, but never, ever, ever good people.
Together we are the Lethal Protector!
Why would Venom be okay with letting a plane full of people crash and die? This is something Homelander would do, and Eddie doesn't even call out Venom for letting all these people die. He's just fine with it for some reason. Another character assassination for Venom is that they established that Venom knew about Null the whole time and decided not to warn Eddie about it at any point. This guy has portal technology and could have made it to this planet at any point, even as early as Riot's arrival, yet he didn't warn Eddie or try to prepare for the attack. Whatever happened to this Venom?
We won't let you destroy this world.
And then we get more exposition regarding Null.
Oh, the symbiotes turned on him. The prison we built for him to sleep.
Of course.
For eternity!
So a prison needed to be built in order to stop Null, as if Null and his xenophages couldn't have destroyed it themselves? How could they possibly imprison him by just building a cell, but also have it so the xenophages can't break him out? On top of this, if Null was literally trapped, then why did they just leave him there? They were able to restrain him, so I see no reason why they couldn't have just killed him right there.
Let's say you died. I could bring you back to life, but if I did, our separate life forces would become one single force called a codex.
This already doesn't work. Eddie and Venom separated from each other in Venom 2. This was a major plot point. They still lived as separate life forces, but apparently this creates one single force called a codex?
It's a key that unlocks a cage.
Why would a codex free Null from whatever prison was created? The group of symbiotes that banded together must have had some way of locking up Null, and none of them had access to the codex that is serving as the key to begin with. What did they use to lock up Null if none of them ever had access to the key, being the codex? Venom only had access to the codex when Eddie died, since that's when Venom said that their codex was created. The visual we see only shows us that some strong barriers are holding Null, which doesn't give me any reason to believe the xenophages couldn't just break that open. The only way I'd understand this is if Null was locked up with some magic spell, but none of these symbiotes know a thing about magic. And on top of this, Venom needs a host to even be powerful in the first place. He can't do anything to Null if Null has no host. So how did Venom have a host to stop Null, but mysteriously ditch said host on his planet? What purpose did that serve if he was just going to Earth and spend over 6 months finding the right host? And what strategy could the symbiotes have come up with that Null couldn't have predicted? Remember, Null has the hive mind. He would know what their plan is. So if Null knows what their plan is before they do it, then how would he have failed? And as for another character assassination for Venom, why would he lock up Null if he was also planning to take over the world with Riot by using a rocket to bring over the symbiotes from his home planet? What was his disagreement with Null if they literally had the exact same plan? And if all that was needed to free Null was to create a codex, Riot very clearly had the same plan as Null. What's stopping Riot from finding a host, killing it, then bringing it back to life the same way Eddie was? Riot would have created a codex of his own that could have been used to free Null.
She can only see the codex when a symbiote is in its full true form.
Again, if Venom knew the whole time how this codex stuff worked, then why didn't he say a word about it for so long? He never warned Eddie that he'd be chased by a xenophage if he turned into Venom after the first movie? Why didn't he get chased by xenophages after the first movie if that's even how he was tracked in this movie? Did Null just forget the planet for a whole movie then remember it because the plot demanded it? If one xenophage learned of the location of the codex and the xenophages can enter portals, then why don't we have an army of them scouting the planet to find it? That significantly narrows down the list, and they thankfully have a symbiote hive mind. Venom is also ridiculously nerfed when he's confronted by the military. Venom has swam underwater really quickly in the first movie, and Venom doesn't even need to fully form in order to maneuver Eddie Brock or perform complex stunts. Why can't Venom just rush Eddie away from these soldiers immediately? Why wasn't Eddie warned of them beforehand, like he was in his apartment when dealing with Carlton Gant's goons? Why is Eddie struggling against fodder military guys? It doesn't matter if he's not in his full form, he can rip their masks off in an instant with Venom's tendrils.
No, the Codex!
Can't let you die!
You don't have to, because you can defend Eddie without fully forming into Venom. Additionally, Venom is shown to be capable of bonding with other creatures. He can literally bond with one of these soldiers and become Venom without worrying about the Codex. He's insanely ineffective in this fight, when Venom is supposed to think of smart and creative solutions on the spot to help Eddie. We see this during the motorcycle chase in the first movie, as that was meant to show us how competent Venom is and why he's so confident in their survival. But Venom is just an idiot now. Venom is now so incompetent that he screams while he's falling down a waterfall instead of just swinging away immediately like we've seen him do in the first movie to escape people. Now he screams and lets his fall happen. Now he just floats around and stares at people pulling out stun sticks without blocking them, then gets taken out so badly because of this, when we've seen Venom body slam multiple police reacting to gunfire while Eddie's back is turned and pull off escape tactics on the spot. The nerfing of him is so significant in the scene.
I killed someone.
They didn't give you a choice.
You didn't give me a choice.
I couldn't get to you.
Not in the rapids. A year ago when you stole my life.
We've been together for a whole year.
A year too long.
I find it really strange that Eddie suddenly wants to split off with Venom and regrets the year he spent with him on the basis of having someone killed in combat. Eddie understands that Venom couldn't get to him in time in this situation, and he's okay with killing his enemies in self-defense. He never holds it against Venom when he's met with little choice. Eddie is most definitely killing, or at least severely injuring, these police officers in this fight. Eddie only asks Venom to stop once they're basically all defeated, and there's no reason to needlessly kill off a police officer. But even when Venom brings up that he didn't have a choice, Eddie then elaborates by saying his life was stolen by Venom from the beginning, as if he wanted to split off with him and regrets his time with him. Yet the entirety of Venom Let There Be Carnage was dedicated to Eddie and Venom constantly fighting, and there needed to be a build-up to them deciding to split up. This was treated as a big deal. Eddie first gets annoyed that Venom acts reckless because he doesn't stop and think before he acts. He tends to act on impulse when people mistreat Eddie, and therefore risk legal trouble for both of them. Eddie knows that Venom ultimately wants what is best for him, that's why he accepts him by the end of the first movie, and the second movie expands upon this.
Eddie, I apologize that I can't mend the heart. Emotional pain, it hits much harder, and it lasts longer.
Yeah, well, that's easy for you to say. Because I'm a real boy, and you're just an amoeba.
I will only take that because we are hurting right now. Don't worry, buddy. I will get you through this.
The next morning, Venom tries to cheer him up. It may not have worked, but Eddie still understands the intention. Moments like this are why Eddie doesn't just cut off Venom. There needs to be many escalations that play into such a consideration. Eddie believes that his second chance at a better life is being put into jeopardy by Venom. He tries to explain the problem to Venom, but he refuses to listen at many points, and even tries to justify his actions. It gets to a point where the argument gets heated and Venom starts to physically attack Eddie, which causes Eddie to fully split off with Venom.
I wish I never met you!
The point of this movie was for Eddie and Venom to overcome that, realizing that they were wrong to reject each other in this way. It's Eddie that calls Anne to let her know that he needs Venom back. Knowing of Carnage's killings is what pushes Eddie to try to reconnect. In spite of their differences, Eddie knows that Venom was always important in trying to protect innocent people from bad guys. This leads to an apology he makes to Venom, and they rebond with each other.
Look! They're not symbiotic. They're not a match.
We are
That's right. We are.
the Lethal Protector!
They even take a vacation from San Francisco because they're fugitives of the law, like their best friends. And even on their vacation, they still intend to be the Lethal Protector when it counts.
Just go back a minute. You telling me, you just said that you love me.
Where will we go?
Anywhere that needs a lethal protector, I suppose.
So let's get back to Venom: The Last Dance. Why does Eddie suddenly feel resentment towards Venom because Eddie had to kill someone in self-defense, something they've been okay with for a while? Why does Eddie decide that Venom was bonded with him for a year too long? Why does Eddie want to split off with Venom and regret his time with him, when it took much more for him to even consider that in the second Venom movie, which they both ultimately overcame by the end? It's because he's character assassinated. That's why.
Rock symbiote?
He's the only one who carries a codex.
This information isn't public. Not even Eddie himself knew that he was carrying a codex, which means the only way Toxin could know this is through the symbiote hive mind, alongside Noel, who talks about this earlier. If the symbiote hive mind that can extend to different universes can also be used to find out that Venom is carrying the Codex, then why doesn't Noel use that same symbiote hive mind to track down Venom's current location? He clearly can't withhold that, because if he could, he would have done the same to prevent the other symbiotes from learning of the Codex even existing in Venom. Noel should be able to track down Venom immediately with the hive mind, and there should be an army of xenophages pulling up through the portals. And we have to extend this beyond this plot as well. As of Venom, Let There Be Carnage, we don't know much about the hive mind, and it's largely the responsibility of the third Venom movie to expand upon it. We can at least infer that the symbiote hive mind has a level of control of the intel that is shared within the hive mind, but this movie tells us that other symbiotes can simply learn of Venom having the Codex through the hive mind, without Venom having the capacity to keep this a secret. And this movie also reveals that these symbiotes were created by Noel, who would want to have all this intel anyway when he designed the hive mind. So looking at the first Venom movie, the plot is destroyed. The 6 months time gap does not work because within that time, Noel would have already known that they were on Earth through the hive mind and would have invaded it from the start. Riot wouldn't need to interrogate Eddie on where Venom is if the hive mind would have told him that information. Once Eddie died and a Codex was created, this knowledge should have made it to Noel. After defeating Riot, Venom should have been a big target, and even if Venom didn't stay in his full form, the hive mind would still pull from Venom's memory of his current location. The Codex would have been snatched from Venom. Carnage wouldn't be spending this entire movie looking for Eddie Brock if the hive mind just tells him where Venom is. Every plot in this trilogy is significantly damaged by this. We then get into the subplot where Eddie bumps into this family and they have this side adventure together. Already, I think the subplot with this family is unnecessary. If they cut it out or minimized its involvement in the movie, the pacing would be so much better and the overall narrative wouldn't change. And I don't even think it's in character for Eddie to go with this family. Eddie is on the run, he's a fugitive of the law. Even before he was a fugitive, he was still pretty well known because he ran his own TV show. People knew his face just at a random bar.
Aren't you Eddie Brock? I used to be.
Even if these people don't recognize his face now, there's a chance they will later on and report his name to the police. Alternatively, if they track down Eddie's location and another fight starts, then this puts this innocent family in the crossfire. And it's way quicker if Eddie just stole a car or used another animal to get around. So it's not just the pacing that feels off, but Eddie's character is once again being damaged. I really don't see what the road trip scene is adding to the narrative. I don't know what is being achieved by having us sit with his family and listen to them sing together. The most we get out of this is Venom saying he thinks they'd be happier with a life like this, but Eddie and Venom already considered themselves family. The end of Venom 2 shows them on a vacation trip together. Having Eddie reflect on the idea of building a family doesn't add anything to his character. It doesn't lead to any major payoffs in the movie or moments of growth for either of these characters. There's no reason to spend so much time on this. It doesn't set anything up. And after that, a moment is dedicated to showing a kid saying that he doesn't want to see aliens because he's scared, and Eddie has to promise the kid that he won't see an alien. This is meant to prove that Eddie can be a good father, but like I said earlier, this leads to no payoffs at all, and we already kinda have that dynamic with Venom and Eddie in the second movie. Eddie has to constantly get Venom under control, and sometimes act like his parent. Nothing interesting or new is being said about Eddie's character. This doesn't lead to anything that pushes his character forward. These points in the movie feel needlessly slow as the pacing goes on. Eddie eventually arrives at Las Vegas and bumps into Mrs. Chen. She begins to yell his name when they meet, and Eddie for some reason doesn't tell her to tone it down because, again, he's a fugitive from the law and stating his name out loud is going to draw attention.
If we are on the news here, we are on the news everywhere.
I do wonder, how does Mrs. Chen not know that Eddie Brock is on the run when it's been all over the news? Because if she did know, she wouldn't be shouting his name like that out in public.
Let's dance, baby.
Love dancing.
Crazy, that thing will find us.
Okay, easy compromise. Do the dance without fully forming as Venom. We know Venom can engage in activities without fully forming. No, Venom proceeds to do it anyway and put Mrs. Chen in danger alongside anybody else inside that building. I'm supposed to believe that this guy is the lethal protector, not someone who likes being bad because it makes him happy.
I give up.
What's the matter, Brock? Forget to stand up for yourself as you've done many times in the past? I want to add that this scene doesn't add anything to the narrative. It does nothing to progress their relationship with Mrs. Chen. They have no meaningful conversations. They literally just meet up for a dance and nothing else happens, which is another hindrance to the pacing while also being built on a character assassination of both of them. No wonder both of them get captured after this, but even when Eddie gets the chance to escape soon afterwards...
Big mistake.
Why did he have to go in full form to heal Eddie? The symbiote can heal Eddie from injuries without fully forming, and he can still block these bullets with the symbiote. There's no reason to draw the xenophage over here and get even more people killed. He also just stands there for a while instead of just forming back into Eddie Brock, and even when Toxin jumps in and dies very quickly, he still remains in Venom form when he knows that's the only thing that keeps the xenophage around to kill people here. They don't kill people at random if they don't see the codex and aren't being aggressively targeted. Eddie doesn't even try to tell them not to engage because otherwise it could kill them, since he saw earlier that this monster generally just leaves if it's not being attacked. This is yet another example of the Lethal Protector not living up to the name. I also gotta ask, whatever happened to the struggle of achieving symbiosis that was established in the first Venom movie?
These creatures need to bond with a respiratory host in order to survive for any amount of time in an oxygen-rich environment.
Well, why are all these hosts showing this hyperacute rejection?
That's what we're trying to find out.
So many test subjects are given hope that everything will turn out okay from Carlton Gant, and so many test subjects have died because they failed to achieve symbiosis. Venom failed to bond with someone for 6 months until he met Eddie Brock.
It's equalizing.
Why this rabbit?
It's similar to an organ transplant.
Where the donor and recipient must be an exact match?
That's correct.
Achieving symbiosis is presented as such a big deal. Carlton Gant considered this a breakthrough when he saw Eddie successfully bond with Venom. This movie makes it so that any random person in the room can just bond with a symbiote without the worry of the symbiote killing them. Apparently, Carlton Gant spent 6 months trying to find a breakthrough that you can apparently achieve in seconds when an alien monster gets the drop on you. In terms of continuity, none of this can make sense. So this entire time, the xenophages were capable of utilizing the symbiote's weaknesses to sound, and never thought to utilize this to slow down Venom this entire movie, or even earlier in the lab to get rid of those other symbiotes? Or even just to save Nolan's backstory, what am I saying?
What's that noise?
She found home.
I don't know why Noel never thought to bring more xenophages earlier in the movie. He should have already known the Codex was on Earth long before this. Why does Eddie have the family take cover under the car instead of creating a big shield for them, long enough for them to escape with the car? Seems like a really inefficient way of getting them to safety. The General eventually gets stabbed in the chest, but gets saved by Venom and another symbiote. We've already seen at many points that symbiotes can transfer itself to other hosts. Is there some reason Eddie and this other symbiote don't think to save this General's life when he's bleeding out? You'd think at least one of them would have offered to do this, or the scientist who was literally carrying a symbiote in her pocket. But then, this leads to the ending sacrifice. And this is pulled off by Venom drawing a group of xenophages towards him and somehow having the full strength to absorb all of them at once. These things can shred through regular symbiotes in a heartbeat. How are we expected to believe that Venom can hold an entire group of them off by just covering them up? If this was something the symbiotes could do, then why didn't the many other symbiotes do this beforehand? Why didn't Venom do this during the earlier encounters when it was just one xenophage that they were dealing with? And even when the xenophages were getting killed off alongside Venom, it still doesn't make sense. All that was done to eliminate them was to have acid get poured onto them and blow up the area they were in. The immediate problem here is that not only does Venom have a regenerative healing factor, but the xenophages do as well. They survived being chopped up by an airplane's engine, alongside being blown up by the General, which ended up killing the symbiote in the crossfire and not the xenophage. How could Venom's sacrifice possibly work? What this communicates to me is that Noel knows what is happening on the spot, as if he is in constant communication with the xenophages, but that just raises even more questions, because if they were constantly communicating on the spot, then why doesn't Noel just tell the xenophages where to find Venom every time he loses full form, which Noel would have been told by the xenophages as it happened. Noel would have been able to use the hive mind to locate Eddie, and if the xenophage is sent to that location while Eddie is in an isolated area, which happens in the movie, then the xenophage would know to target the only living creature in that area. It's not like the xenophage is so blind that it can't tell. Since it was smart enough to use its sound to remove a symbiote, then specifically grab the symbiote with the intention to eat it. So if Eddie were isolated in an area and Noel tells the xenophage that is Venom, then the xenophage would know who to target. And then the movie ends on a fairly bittersweet note. I actually like what it's going for here, and in isolation, it's a neat ending. But the problem I have in spite of this is the same problem I have with No Way Home's ending. Although it's neat in isolation as a send-off, everything that came before it makes it largely unearned. On a plot level, how we got here already doesn't work. On a character level, Eddie Brock and Venom have faced significant damage as characters, and they haven't meaningfully progressed as characters, which makes an ending like this carry less weight. There wasn't an arc for Eddie or Venom. There was nothing new said about their characters, nor were they explored from any different angles from what we've seen before. We didn't get much substance between these two characters to earn that payoff. And as for the villain they defeated, they never even confront him in the movie. Null doesn't even have 5 minutes of screen time. The most we get as an opposing force to Venom are the mindless xenophages, or the general who initially thinks the most efficient solution is to kill Eddie or Venom. The general has the most going for him, but all we really have is a setup for a conflict between Eddie and the general. By the end, he only changes his mind out of necessity, and there's no dynamic between his character and Eddie, since they barely ever interact. So much of this movie feels incomplete, even compared to the previous movies. Cletus Cassidy at least felt like a fleshed out villain with an interesting dynamic with Eddie. Carlton Gant at least had somewhat of a compelling viewpoint to justify his villainous actions. Although Eddie and Venom aren't perfectly written, it feels like there was true progression to Eddie and Venom's relationship, and they went on meaningful arcs in order to achieve those grand payoffs where they save the day. Even if elements of it are rushed, it feels much more complete than what we have with Venom: The Last Dance. That's all I have to say for now. If you disagree with anything, feel free to come onto our Disagreement Day streams. We try to do these every week or so. And with how bad this movie was, and with how bad Joker 2 was, stay tuned for that one by the way, I can safely say that Deadpool and Wolverine took a landslide lead for comic book movies this year.
Because I'm Marvel Jesus.